Oh, I'm recording. Sorry.
Fucking... Yeah. All right, no, that's fine. All right, I think there's a helicopter going overhead right now. So just give me a sec.
That's just the nukes going off.
It's just the nukes.
Any state that didn't vote for Trump, he's just nuking.
We gotta nuke these Democrat cities, these Democrat-run states.
We're gonna prevent these riots.
We're gonna provide relief, all right. Relief from your motherfucking lives. Fire the nukes.
He's the guy with the eye patch from Dawn of the Dead original.
Oh my
We're just
God.
gonna fucking nuke them. We're just gonna nuke them all.
We gotta nuke them all. They will run out of food, all the poor people. Lots of people have been telling me they're the best nukes. All right. I hope
that goes in the outtakes.
I might just do it at the beginning of the episode.
Oh, I love when you do
that. 3, 2, 1. Welcome to another episode of the Politipop Podcast, the podcast where we take your favorite pop culture media and discuss the social and political themes within. I'm your co-host, Mike Booch, a.k.a. Smokes Fat Bowls, and in my second seat today is my co-host, Ty.
Yes, Ty, without any kind of AKAs. What's up?
Hey, no problem. I think we're just used to you being Ty.
And yeah. Every once in a while, I come out with a banger, so just be ready.
And that's what makes your AKAs more special, I feel. You know, like, I'll have a bunch of okay ones, but the few you have are, like, fucking awesome.
That's it. Go big or go home, you know?
Never forget Roar Snack. And while we're at it, never forget to listen to us and rate and review us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. 5-star reviews go a very long way in getting us up in the algorithm and the search results. And if you're listening to us on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Now, today we are going to start our month-long Native-Centric media reviews with the movie Smoke Signals from 1998. Ty, how do you feel about this?
It was a very 90s movie, and I really enjoyed it.
So did I. I was, like I said, it had been a long time since something had actually made me feel good after watching it. So
they don't make movies like this anymore. I feel like, you know what I mean? Like, it's definitely like one of those films that's just like a fun adventure with some dramatic moments, and it just makes you feel good.
Have you ever seen Wild America with Jonathan Taylor Thomas and other white people?
No, I have not.
It's based off a true story about these kids who wanted to go cross country and film wildlife and stuff, and in doing so, they ended up starting their careers as wildlife documentarians.
Okay.
And they made this movie about their life story, and it's another 90s movie. It's one of my wife's favorites, and it's corny and ridiculous, and the effects definitely don't hold up, but you know, it is one of those 90s feel-good movies,
right.
And this was very much the same thing. Actually, you know what? Let me see which came out first. I don't want to say it was the same thing. It was very similar,
right.
In tone. I can say that.
What I'm curious about is, like, did a lot of white people not just not see this movie, Smoke Signals? Because I'd never seen it before. You hadn't seen it before. I asked like a bunch of my family members, some other people, and my girlfriend, who is Hispanic, has indigenous blood. She was like, it came out in 98. Like, everyone's seen it, And sadly, that was not the case when I polled people.
No, I don't think the majority of people have seen this film. And I mean, for as white as you are, you're still like into film. Oh shit, Devin Sawa was also in Wild America.
Oh,
so Wild
Devin
America came out in 97. For those of you who aren't aware, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, also known as Tim the Toolman Taylor's kid,
the best
in
kid,
Home Improvement, and also he was Simba as a child in The Lion King. And Devin Sawa was Final Destination and Casper and Idle Hands. The 90s were a very good time for
Yeah, Idle Hands.
Is your ear ringing a little bit? Do you hear that?
Yeah, I do. What is that?
Well, I'm glad you asked, Ty. It's actually the spoiler alert. It is coming in hard and fast, that's what she said. And this spoiler alert is letting you know that if you have not seen the movie Smoke Signals from 1998, 1 year after Wild America, please make sure that you watch Smoke Signals before we spoil the shit out of this movie.
Yes.
But yeah, but I think we're ready to get into it. Now, you suggested this movie, I believe, at the behest of your girlfriend, who is much more cultured than either of us put together.
Yes.
And dude, I listen to a lot of movie review podcasts, and it's weird to have people approach like some of the films that I love just as generic generic watchers. Like, they're not fans of it. They just go in and look at it, because they have to do it for the podcast. They do it for business. And that's very much what this one was.
Right.
I wasn't like super excited to watch it or anything, but, I told you earlier yesterday, man, I really miss the 90s. And I don't remember exactly what I miss about it, but I watched this movie and it just felt so good to watch. And it was emotional. It was a roller coaster. It was a great coming of age story. And it turns out it's based on the book The Lone Ranger and Tonto Fight in Heaven.
Yes.
And before we...
By Sherman Alexie?
Probably Alexi. Now, he did not... Did he do any writing on the film or no?
He did. He actually wrote the screenplay as well.
Oh, so he adapted his own work into
screenplay. Yeah, I mean, the reason my girlfriend suggested this film, because it's the first film to ever be written, directed, and co-produced by Native Americans. So you got a big thing there, plus a lot of Native American actors as well. So it's pretty unique in that aspect.
Speaking of its uniqueness, since we've already given the spoiler warning, Ty, why don't you give us the plot?
Smoke signals. Young Native American man Thomas is a nerd in his reservation, wearing oversized glasses and telling everyone stories no one wants to hear. His parents died in a fire in 1976, and Thomas was saved by Arnold. Arnold soon left his family and his tough son Victor, and Victor hasn't seen his father for 10 years. When Victor hears Arnold has died, Thomas offers him funding for the trip to get Arnold's remains, but only if Thomas can also go with him. Thomas and Victor hit the road.
So I want to get it out of the way. Do you think Thomas is on the spectrum or no?
I don't think so. I think he's just, he grew up without his parents. He's intelligent. I think he's a little, he definitely doesn't know how to, like, interact with people, for sure. But I don't know if it's autism. I just think there's a lot of factors that have gone into that. I mean, he doesn't quite fit in with other natives either. And that's the bulk of people he interacts with.
From what you were describing his upbringing as, I quickly started thinking of what a Native American Spider-Man would look like. Because
dude, he could be him.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't grow up with his parents. He's kind of a nerdy kid. He keeps to himself. He doesn't interact well with other people. He's a little socially awkward.
But he became best friends with Flash Thompson.
There you go. I think it's just my experience that, like, I always try and diagnose everyone as soon as I see them. Now, obviously, I'm not a doctor, but
right.
I have worked with the neuroatypical population since I was 14 years old now.
Yeah.
So we're going on at least 16, 17 years, in one way or another, either working personally or professionally with the population. But that was the first place my mind went to. And they don't say anything about that in the movie, and I think it's probably better off for it.
I mean, it's a comedy, so I think he's supposed to be, funny and goofy and really silly, especially when compared to Victor, who's very, like, tough and does smile a lot, but it was kind of tough.
You didn't get any Rain Man vibes?
Maybe a little bit. I feel you on that.
That being said, I haven't
see Rain Man? I've seen bits and pieces, as someone once said to me.
But yeah, these characters are such great juxtapositions to each other. Thomas is the socially awkward nerd whose parents died in a fire when he was a baby, and he was luckily saved by Arnold Joseph, who was another indigenous person on the Coeur d'Alene Reservation in Plummer, Idaho, and
who's Victor's father.
Yes, Arnold's own kid, Victor, is about the same age as Thomas. So they grew up together, and it was interesting to see the interactions they've both had with Victor's father, Arnold, because they both have very different memories of him. The plot, like you said, kicks off when Victor gets news that his father has passed away, but he hasn't seen his father since he was a child. And it's kind of puts him in a very weird spot. And what makes it weirder is Thomas saying, "I'll go on this journey with you. I'll go on this trip, on this, kind of like a buddy cop adventure, except without the cop part." And and it was really effective to hear the different perspectives they both had on the same man growing up.
Yeah, and you know, the relationship between Victor and Thomas is interesting because Thomas always seems to kind of want to be Victor's friend. Like, he's always kind of like, you know, hey, Victor, and like chasing after him. Even when they're kids,
hey,
they show this,
hey,
right?
Victor.
Yeah, like he's always like trying to like interact, and Victor just wants like nothing to do with him. He's always making fun of him. You know, he even at one point actually punches them in the face when they're kids. Like, they have a lot of really tough interactions. I think Thomas's grandmother even says, like, he's always mean to you, you know, but for some reason Thomas wants to be his friend. And I'm not sure if that was because of his relationship with Victor's father or if he just sees the good in people, you know, but yeah, Thomas is just like this really like likable, like goofy kind of nerdy guy, you know, and Victor obviously has a lot of resentment for his father, and you know, even though he grew up, you know, around his parents, he didn't have an easy childhood either, and they both have different difficulties, you know, that they grew up with.
Yeah, and that brings me to the first thing I wanted to talk about in this episode, because we find out that Arnold. Can I spoil the big twist at the ending?
Listen, there was a spoiler alert that went by, so I think you're good.
The spoiler alert did hit. I'm clear. But toward the end of the film, we actually find out that Arnold Joseph, the one who saved Thomas from the fire that killed his parents, he was actually responsible for the fire that killed Thomas's parents.
Yeah.
They were, for some reason, celebrating Independence Day, 4th of July.
It's such a funny thing. They're like, his father held the largest party ever in the tribe's history to celebrate the white people's independence on Independence Day 1976. I love how they purposely said that, you know.
Yeah, and like, I mean, part of, you know, I'm surprised they didn't bring up anything like, oh, well, our ancestors fucking killed you guys because you held the largest party for Thomas the white man's Independence Day.
A fire rose up like General Custer and ate up his mother and father. You know, they make very specific references to history and you know, to the genocide of natives throughout the film, but they're done in like, you know, off-kilter, like funny ways, but they're there, you know, if you're paying attention.
Yeah, I think that's the benefit of seeing a modern representation of indigenous peoples, because when we get to our Yellowstone episode at some point this month, we'll talk a bit about how one of those actors in an interview actually said that you don't see that often, and it's you know, it's true, at least in the mainstream. Like, whenever we see depictions of native peoples in popular media, it's normally from the Wild West days and stuff, and before they started dressing like the Europeans and becoming more assimilated to them as they continued to push them off their lands and kill and rape them and everything and enslave them. But, you know, seeing a more modern representation, it goes back to what we've always talked about how if you're a certain type of person, race is a part of your story regardless. And, you know, they like you said, they don't ham-fist it in. They don't go like, oh, well, here's exactly what happened, blah, 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 you know, with General Custer's Last Stand. But they bring it up, you know, in kind of tongue-in-cheek ways. Like, this is definitely a part of their culture. They don't dwell on it. They live with what they have. But it is a part of who they are. They definitely don't forget their history. Yeah,
and you know, and as you mentioned, Arnold is the one who sets the fire, killing Thomas's parent. And there was a great moment here where they kind of almost give you that answer, because I think Arnold's grandmother mentions how, you know, he saved Thomas and he did a good thing, and he says, "I didn't mean to," and he starts crying. And that caught me as being so strange. I'm like, what does he mean he didn't mean to do a good thing? You know what I mean? And then later on, you find out, you know, he didn't mean to set the fire. He didn't mean to have to leave the tribe. You know, he didn't mean to do a lot of things that wound up happening throughout his life and the life of these two kids. And obviously he had regrets immediately. And you know, it's something that weighs on this whole family, whether they know the answer or not.
Arnold is an alcoholic. His wife was also an alcoholic until she decided to get her shit together after she saw how it was affecting their son Victor. Actually, I want to touch really quick on how, you know, for some reason, you know, it seems like Victor's always mean to Thomas. honestly, it's whenever people aren't around that Thomas just starts talking shit about Victor's family.
That is true, though.
He doesn't do it on purpose. He just is like, oh, like, this is a fun thing to talk about.
He's like, your daddy left you. He's never coming back. Your dad's an alcoholic.
He's probably not coming back. Everyone says your dad fucking sucks. Blah, blah, blah.
Heard your mom sleeping around, Victor.
Yeah, like,
what the fuck, man?
And then like he beats the shit out of him. He's like the Rick James to Victor's Charlie Murphy. Like,
everyone's like, Victor, what the fuck, man? What are you doing that to him?
He's always crossing the line. He's a habitual line stepper, this guy. I did note that Arnold should get an NFL contract or something with the fast hands he had. The way he saves this baby is they throw Thomas out of the house, out of the burning house.
A 2-story window.
He dives and catches this baby.
Yeah, he could have been in the NFL.
But yeah, so alcoholism is actually a huge issue in Native communities. You'll see in the show notes and sources, we have a few articles, and actually these are all YouTube videos, different interviews and documentary pieces. One is by Vice about prohibition in Canada and whether or not it's working. And the other is a Guardian piece on the Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota. Now, the reason I bring up Canada is because we often forget about Canada's treatment of its Indigenous peoples because we focus on how fucked up our own was, but we're still part of the same continent. They're still North America, and and their treatment really hasn't been different. And there actually was a prohibition clause put into effect that that alcohol was not allowed in Indigenous communities in, I believe it was Saskatchewan, where Harold Johnson's from. He's the individual who speaks on it, and he actually was inspired to write a book called Firewater. And this is after he went on a spirit quest, and he had a vision that he had to do something. So Firewater is kind of his memoir to the negative effects that alcohol has had on the Native community. While it focused the interview focuses specifically on Canada, in which he also mentions that there was a case where a Native man was actually drunk off the reservation. He was going to be tried for it. The Canadian Supreme Court threw out the charges and, without talking to the tribe, ended the prohibition.
Really?
And yeah. So they ended the prohibition without even talking. And this wasn't like the 1800s, or this was like the 1960s or 70s.
Wow.
Prohibition, had been in place for a while, and from what I gather, there's been kind of a tug of war going back and forth between it. Check out the sources for a more in-depth look. But just historically, alcohol has been used to weaken Indigenous communities, not too different from how the CIA used crack to weaken Black and urban and brown communities. But
right.
It is kind of an interesting thing because the way Harold Johnson talks about it, he says, like, if it's there, we're going to drink it. And I mean, it was really rough to watch that interview because as an adult, you consider yourself to be like, well, if I don't want to drink alcohol, I won't drink it. If people do want to drink alcohol, then they will drink it. Like, it's not like these natives are children. It's not like they can't make their own decisions. But also, I think that, there is a history in which Native communities all over have been made to be dependent on the governments who have historically marginalized them.
Right.
And then becoming dependent on them, having so many resources taken away and having some handouts given to kind of keep them afloat. They're put in situations where alcohol is kind of like the only medication they have. And speaking of medication, it was funny because Harold Johnson said that if it were marijuana in the community, he was like, fine. He was like, smoke your dope, stay at home watching cartoons and eating munchies. Don't go get in a car and kill someone. He talks about how 50% of the cases he worked on as a Crown prosecutor involved alcohol in some way, shape, or form, whether it was fetal alcohol syndrome or drunk driving or domestic abuse or child abuse or suicide. Like, it really is heartbreaking. Now they don't approach it much in this movie, which I once again I like that they don't make the whole movie about alcoholism, but it is there. It's very much a part of Victor's life, and you do find out later that Victor, because of the way he grew up with his parents, has never had a drink in his life.
Yeah, he wants nothing to do with it. I mean, his father is clearly seen driving around drunk, drinking in the truck, driving with his son. right? Thomas and Victor later encounter these two girls, Velma and Lucy, driving around, and at first Lucy's like, "Give me a drink," as she's driving backwards through the reservation, right? And Velma's like, "Oh, we don't drink anymore." So like at one point they were drinking and driving too. So it's clearly like something that happens pretty often. It's not heavily policed.
Oh, is that the girls with the Coca-Cola bottle in the car?
Yes.
Okay, yes. I completely missed that part, so thanks for bringing it up again.
Absolutely.
I do. I also like how they were so the way that these two characters, Velma and Lucy, and they're very much tertiary characters in the story, but they help kind of start the journey for Victor and Thomas. You see them and they're driving backwards, and at first I thought that this effect was just so it looked like they were driving forwards and able to look back at the camera. Like, I thought it was kind of like something in Talladega Nights, they made a car look like it was forwards, but it looked like it was driving backwards, but it was actually driving forwards. I thought that's what they were. Oh, okay. Well, I thought that's what they were doing, something like that. But it turns out that the actor who played Lucy, Elaine Miles, she actually learned how to drive backwards.
Yeah, they didn't have to use a stunt person. Like she just did it.
How wild is that?
Which is pretty cool.
That's so cool. It really is. I like that a lot. Can I talk about Nobody real quick too?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is a moment in which, there's a flashback of a wild rager that they're throwing over at the Joseph household. And Victor's father asks him who his favorite Indian is, and Victor replies, "Nobody," which, gets his father very upset. We do see a couple other scenes. He hits his wife, he hits his son, he's abusive, which is why he finally decides to leave.
Right.
But it turns out that Nobody is actually a role that was played by Gary Farmer, the actor who plays Arnold Joseph.
And Dead Man, with Johnny Depp, right?
Dead Man. Yeah, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like little things like that. There's also another another moment where Victor finally gets the call about his father passing away, and that he has to. There was something about him signing papers. I guess he had to, confirm that he was the next of kin and then take his belongings. And his mom says, how Indians feel about signing papers. Once again, just a quick little nod to all the bullshit that, that happened in the U.S., not just under Andrew Jackson, but he's the one who comes to mind. There was also Abraham Lincoln and countless others who have, told natives like, hey, fight for us and we'll give you this land, and then push them off the land later, and, constantly manipulating them into signing contracts and agreeing to things that end up getting broken later on. Like, it cannot be understated how abused and marginalized the Native community has been throughout all of United States history.
Right.
And there's also world history. I don't know enough about the indigenous peoples of other. I mean, I know about my Dominican ancestors, the Taínos that met Christopher Columbus back in the 1400s.
Hey.
But that's a listen to the outtakes of the election episode if you want to hear all about the Columbus takedown, baby.
Oh yeah, but again, this is done like in a comedical way, but it's still dropping actual. Little nods to history and the crimes that are committed against Native Americans, which I thought was great. And I also kind of want to just mention that there seems like, to me, almost like this this oppressive or depressing feel to this reservation, right? Like, it feels like nobody knows what to do. Like, they're all bored. That's why they're drinking and driving backwards. There's a guy who has a traffic van that's been broken down since 1972, and he talks about the traffic on the radio every morning, and there's never any traffic, right? And it's funny. It's a funny thing, but it just kind of shows like nothing really happens in the reservation, right? Like, there's just nothing exciting going on. There's no changes. It's just, the same thing almost every day for these people.
And they make it a point to show that nothing happens. I think it was also a conscious effort to kind of keep the tone of the movie light, to show that whether nothing happens, good or bad. We will talk about later in this month, and I don't even remember what we're reviewing next week, the week after that. I know it comes up in the Yellowstone a little bit, but there's lots of bad stuff. that happens on native reservations.
Yeah, I think we're gonna get a little
this,
heavier, later in the month. But this was a nice lighthearted version of these things.
So I won't spoil those things, but I will say that with individuals who have been given such limited resources in so many different ways, it's not much different from how in our own urban communities, individuals who are socioeconomically disadvantaged turn to crime, drugs, what have you. The Indian reservations aren't very different. As a matter of fact, I'll bring it back to Harold Johnson, who was talking about the Canadian prohibition problem. He says that when a white man's problem reaches indigenous communities, the problems are magnified. So whatever our problems are with alcoholism, it's way worse in indigenous communities. It's I couldn't even imagine it. You think of you and I on Long Island with the opioid epidemic and everything.
Right.
Like it's rough. Do you think they're like hobbits by any chance or no?
I mean, they're going on a journey. They've never been this far away from home before.
Yeah, you have two hobbits who are going on a journey. Meanwhile, everybody on the reservation kind of like lives their own little humble lives. They're not really looking for anything, more extravagant or fantastic. They just kind of live there. Now, let me ask you real quick. Do you know whether or not they have to pay for that land, or that's just their land? Like, is that why Thomas, and I this is my fault. This is my ignorance for not knowing enough on the spot. But because Thomas does say, "What do you need a job for on the res anyway?"
I think like it's legally their land until the United States says we're taking it back. So which happens all the fucking time. But I think it is technically their land. That's why there's no I don't like. There's definitely different laws, like, that's why people go and buy cigarettes on a reservation, right? Because like the taxes are different,
tax-free,
and stuff.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So, I don't know if they pay anything. Maybe they, I don't know if there's like different councils of Native Americans that run different things and stuff like that. But I don't think they have to pay the government for their land.
Well, take a look at the Coeur d'Alene website when you get the chance, listeners. It's in our show notes, and it has a whole history of the Coeur d'Alene reservation and community and everything, and maybe you'll find some answers.
It does look like they pay for taxes though, so I don't know if they have to pay taxes on the land. So
okay. What? Anything else you wanted to talk about before I get to my next point?
No, I was just gonna say, if we're going with the Hobbit reference, I feel like instead of the One Ring, it's Victor's father's ashes. That would be the thing they have to transport back.
Exactly, and the different trials and tribulations they have to overcome on their way.
Yeah.
I do like the interactions they have on the bus, in which Thomas is being very nice to this so-called gymnast, and just making
Olympic
conversation
gymnast.
with her. This so-called Olympic gymnast, and then Victor calls her out on her bullshit, and she ends up switching to a different seat, and he tells Thomas that you can't just be nice to everybody, that you kind of in order to be quote unquote a real Indian, you have to be hard, you have to be stoic, people are awful, they'll rob you blind if you're not watching. Like that's what he says. Now, what I thought was really interesting about that is that he tells Thomas he doesn't know how to be a proper Indian, and I'm not sure anybody really does at a certain point.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, because Thomas's whole experience growing up without his parents, he had his grandmother, but he has been indoctrinated by the white man's media. He's watched Dances with Wolves, Last of the Mohicans. He watches the cowboy movies, and he says the cowboys always win. Like, I think his idea of what a Native American is and what he tries to emulate comes from the media of the people who have technically erased the history. I wonder how much of that actually happens in real life.
Yeah, I mean, I know that they try to preserve their culture, but a lot of it has been destroyed, right? Just a little divergence here. A couple of years back when I was in Massachusetts, I went to Plymouth, and they have this like area where they've recreated like a pioneer village, and they also have like a native village, and they have actual natives there showing you things about their culture and like how to make stuff. And they were showing us that there's a certain type of boat that particular tribe made, and they don't know how to make it anymore. It's been lost to history. They can't find.
Holy shit.
They can't find the information on it. They have tried recreating it. They get close. They have some other boats that they can make, but they can never make this specific type of boat that they know their tribe made. And I just thought that was so sad, that there's no way to recover that. There's nowhere to find that information. And I'm sure that happens all the time. There's so many things about their culture that have been lost and erased by Europeans and by our country that have just taken that from them forever.
And let's talk real quick about certain traditions that are upheld, because Thomas's entire kind of, can I say id? Is that proper? I don't know if I'm using it correctly, but his character is very much based off the oral tradition, that he is the one who is constantly telling stories. And while a lot of people love those stories, whether or not they be true or a little embellished, Victor is the one who doesn't really like them because... And I felt this a little bit because I'm terrible at remaining quiet around people. I always have to be talking about something, and it seems that Thomas is the same way. And when he does end up talking too much, he kind of puts his foot in his mouth. Like I have many a time. But he is very intent on telling all these great stories about Arnold Joseph. Yeah, he says that Arnold Joseph was protesting Vietnam in full native garb and knocked out a National Guardsman who was getting in his face and attempted to subdue him, and he ended up getting 2 years in jail for that. And he tells the story of how Thomas, when he was a kid, he used to walk all the way to Spokane alone and watch the river, watch the water for hours. And at one point, Arnold Joseph is there. He's like, "What the hell are you doing here?" And Arnold Joseph actually took him to Denny's, and he has so many heartwarming stories, and the most heartwarming story I think comes from Susie Song's character. Susie Song is the woman who was at least looking after Arnold Joseph toward the end of his life. Did they have a romantic thing, do you think?
No. Victor asked her at one point, "Did you love my father?" And she says, "Yeah, like in a way, he was like a father to me." And I think it's this pattern of Arnold being a father to everyone but Victor, right? Being a father to Thomas, being a father to Susie. And it helps build that kind of resentment that Victor has, because he's like, why couldn't he be a father for me? And so I don't think it was romantic at all. I think they were just companions to each other in a lonely place.
Probably would have been better if he was banging Susie Song, because then at least he'd have been like, all right, cool. He left me and my family to have sex with a younger woman all the time. But no, it's worse. He went to go father somebody else, and he sobered up too. He swore off the booze. He sobered up. He became a better man, but couldn't bring that better man back to his own family. Susie Song is played by Irene Bedard, or Bedard. I'm going to say Bedard. And this is what I told you. I said I could call her Pocahontas the whole podcast, and it won't be racist, because she actually plays Pocahontas, which I thought was so cool.
Yeah, multiple times too.
Yeah. She's the voice actor for Pocahontas in the first one. I think the sequel in Wreck-It Ralph. I think. Yeah. So good for her. Whenever Pocahontas needs to return to screen, hopefully she'll be the voice. Hopefully she'll have a job. I think they should do like Pocahontas: The Reckoning, like where she comes back into the future. Like she comes to the future. No, she's unfrozen in the future, right?
Right. Okay.
And she's like, oh, vengeance. Like,
I mean, they would have to redo the original story, because the original one's very lovey-dovey.
Oh, well, that's absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. You know what? It turns out that she was okay, she was frozen in some terrible ice storm, right? And then she was found, and they kept her on ice somehow. And then they started feeding memories into her of like, oh, like, John Smith didn't rape you when you were a teenager or preteen girl. Yeah. He actually was your husband. And then all of a sudden, she wakes up and she realizes the truth, and she's like, what? Fuck this.
Right. Or the original John Smith did rape her and then killed her second John Smith husband, if we want to go by Disney lore. And now she's out to hunt his family down.
I like it. Let's do it.
All right. I'll call Disney.
Yeah, call him up. See what we can get for this. So she ends up that might stay in, it might not. But yeah, so she ends up kind of telling telling the story about a story that Arnold told her, and it was this really riveting tale about how a couple of Jesuit priests were on the reservation, and speaking of which, they do mention communion. They do have American United States flags on the reservation. Like, they are very much assimilated, and a lot of them probably are somewhat religious as far as Christianity is concerned. But yeah, so Arnold and Victor's a kid at this point, are playing these two fully grown adult Jesuit priests in basketball. Basketball is a huge part of the Joseph household, and it's Victor's best quality. He's a true athlete. And they're playing, and he tells this amazing story about how Victor made the game-winning shot, and he was like the toughest kid, and stood up to these priests.
I love this whole scene, like the way it's shot, so dramatic.
So
there's nobody else there but Arnold, right? And he's just like running around, like throwing the basketball, like telling the story. He's very animated. You can tell like how important this story is to him, and like he's really building his son up, and like you can feel the love in the story. This is like the first time he really shows that love for his son. I think to us, the audience, at least.
I think he showed it to everyone else but his son, which kind of sucked. Like, it's the whole like, oh, I told this person about how much you mean to me, and it's like, well, why didn't you just tell me?
Yes.
Like,
yep.
And it really was this beautiful moment, and in that, I started thinking, this is my own headcanon, that Thomas's whole storytelling routine, it doesn't just come from the propaganda he's consumed.
It comes from Arnold?
I think part of it comes from Arnold, and I think that's a good part of Arnold that is always present in Thomas.
Right.
And whether or not Victor likes it, there's a part of his father, the good part of his father, that's always there with him.
I agree with that. Yeah, Thomas. They did say Arnold was a storyteller, and I think that is it's beautiful in a way. It's that's there, and Victor may not have taken that aspect, but Thomas did.
Now we kind of passed it a bit, but they because they brought up Custer very quickly. They brought up Custer another time along with Columbus and Truman as well. I haven't gotten to the part in People's History where Truman fucks over the natives, so I'll let you know when that happens. Custer's last stand was, I believe, at the Battle of Little Bighorn, and there was this song that was played. Did you see this in the IMDb notes as well?
I sure did.
So the song is called "All My Relations." It's performed by Ulali at the end of the film, and it uses the traditional Irish tune, Gary Owen, which is either Gary Owen or Gary Owen. I can't say for sure. But yeah, the 7th Cavalry Regiment in 1867. That was the last song they heard before they were killed at Little Bighorn.
Which is interesting because I feel like growing up, you're almost kind of taught how heroic Custer is, right?
Oh yeah,
like,
yeah.
Custer's last stand, and like
Yep.
he's surrounded by savages, and he fought to the end, but like really he was the villain. So it's kind of interesting that's what we're taught, whitewashing history there.
And also, I want to talk about Arnold leaving because it comes back a little later on. When he finally decides that he's going to run away from his family, and part of it I think is running away from his problems. I think the other part is he just doesn't think he's strong enough to defeat his own demons,
right?
And so he aims to protect his family, and he's running. He gets in his car. He gets in his truck. He's driving away. Victor hops in the bed, and he takes him out, gives him one last hug, and drives away again. And Victor is just running on the side of the road, and he's just running and running and running, and he trying to get to his father, who he's never able to get to, and that comes back up a little later. And I thought that was a really great moment as well.
Yeah, as much as he resented him, he didn't want him to go, and that's sad. He even told him, he's like, "Don't go, Dad," and he still left. And I think that's what Victor remembers. He asked his father to stay, and he still left him.
And I'd also like to talk about Arnold's hair, because at the beginning of the movie, he has incredibly long hair. It's almost down to his waist, I think. It's at least down to his belly button.
Yeah.
And after Thomas's parents die, as well, at the beginning, we're told it's kind of like a way of him mourning, but I think it is also him guilting himself now that he knows he started the fire, and him deeming himself no longer worthy of his long hair. But I'll put a link to it in the show notes. According to a blog on thelonghairs.us, the long hair has symbolic significance tying natives to Mother Earth, whose hair is long in grasses. Many Native Americans believe their hair is a physical manifestation of the growth of the spirit, and some say it allows for extrasensory perception and connection to all things. See Avatar for for not so subtle references to that as well. But yeah, the rest of the movie we see Arnold Joseph with short hair. He took off his own, and we also see later on, and this was kind of rough for me to watch because Victor has these beautiful long locks of hair, jet black, straight hair. He really does have beautiful, amazing hair, and he ends up cutting it as well.
Yeah.
Why do you think he did that?
I think it was finally when he kind of started to come to terms with who his father was, and you know, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot to it. You know, he's obviously holding a lot of anger, and I think he's much like his father. He's trying to like let go of this story and move on. You know, was this before or after he goes in the trailer?
This was just after he goes into the trailer. He's looking through his father's things. He finds his father's wallet with a picture of the family in it, and he's sitting on the bed his father died in, and he also finds the pocket knife that belonged to his father. Does he take his father's boots as well, or was he wearing the boots the entire story, the entire movie?
I don't know. I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah,
sure.
yeah. That I don't remember. The only thing I know is because at the very end of the movie, we see that he has these really nice boots, and I'm wondering if he ran in them for the moment that's about to happen.
Oh, that's interesting.
Speaking as somebody who has a very simple relationship with my father, and that I can't fucking stand him, I try to do my best to be not like him in every way possible. If I wake up too late, I feel bad because it's something he would do. If I have my hair a certain way, or I look a certain way, or I'm gaining weight, and you know, all of these things look like him. If I'm making a certain facial expression that I know he made, I want nothing to do with it. So I was very surprised to see Victor Joseph cut his hair off this way. You know, but we do see a reckoning in a little bit. He ends up taking his father's truck and his ashes, and you know, they're driving. By the way, the whole movie, nobody's driving with seatbelts on. That's the one thing I can't stand about this movie, is that nobody's driving with seatbelts on. And you know, it might be kind of a, you know, maybe there's a message there saying that, like, listen, you know, with everything that's been done to their people, they've been living on borrowed time as it is. So,
yes.
You know, so whatever.
It does look like he's wearing boots the whole movie, and he definitely runs in them.
Thank you for checking in on that.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
You're
it.
Phones, am I right?
Yeah. Oh, also, there is a great moment in the bus trip earlier where they get back to the bus after Thomas has made his very temporary transformation into an authentic native, modern Native American man. And these two white guys have taken over their seats, and they can't get the seats back short of starting a physical altercation, so they end up just leaving.
And sitting on a different seat. Yeah, because no one's going to stand up for them. You know, they're the odd men out here.
Maybe that gymnast would have stuck up for them if fucking
Victor wasn't
an asshole. Yeah,
he wasn't wrong, but he definitely wasn't an asshole.
No, he wasn't wrong.
Did you also catch the when the two girls are driving them, and they say, "Did you bring your passports?" And they're like, "Passports? What do you mean?" They're like, "We're going to the USA," and she's like, "Yeah, that's as foreign as it gets. Hope you got your inoculations. I thought that was an interesting joke.
I do remember them mentioning that. Did they say something about vaccinations?
They
or
did.
Inoculations?
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's perfect then, because for those of you who aren't aware, as I wasn't aware until very recently, the whole smallpox thing on a blanket that wiped out so many native peoples, that was actually done on purpose. That's biological warfare. I thought it was done on accident, but it turns out it was not. And a lot of the Montauk people of Montauk, Long Island, were also affected by that. But that I think is a different story. I want to learn a lot more about the native tribes of Long Island before I start speaking to their history.
That's fair.
But there's a lot. As anybody, if you're not listening, I know we have a couple UK listeners and a couple listeners over on the West Coast, but you'll see that there are so many towns on Long Island and so many counties that are named after native tribes.
Yeah, so many. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Even Smithtown, which is named after a white man, was named because he was allegedly given a bull to ride in one day by a native chief, and everything he crossed became Smithtown in that day.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. But that's what they say according to the literal bull statue in Smithtown. I'm sure that the actual history is...
I've learned not to trust that bull.
Yeah, don't ever trust that bull, damn it. But yeah, so obviously, they get their seats taken from them by the white men, which was a very obvious nod to actual U.S. history. But yeah, we have this moment where they're driving in the pickup truck back. They're getting Thomas and Victor are getting into this verbal altercation. The Denny story, I think, just fucking tips him over the edge, man.
Yeah,
and because he tells the Denny story twice about the time that about Arnold Joseph taking Thomas out to get breakfast, and not his own son. I think actually, now that I'm saying it out loud, a big part of that was just because he felt guilty that he took away Thomas's parents. So that's probably why he was overly nice.
That's exactly why. He knew that he was responsible for that, so he always felt like he had to go the extra step for him.
And they're getting into this altercation, and they end up coming upon this car crash, and they end up having to go off the road and crashing their own car.
Yeah. And this is after they left Susie without saying goodbye, right? They just left in the morning.
Oh yeah,
took
I forgot
off.
the Irish exited Susie.
They never even said anything to her, and I don't think they ever see her again. Honestly, that's it. They just take off, and Victor's had enough.
No, but hopefully one day they can contact her using the colors of the wind. She was Pocahontas, guys. She was Pocahontas. It's like saying you contact Thor with the Bifrost.
Yeah, okay. Same thing. Totally the same thing.
Is it not the same thing? I'm going to take a trip to Pennsylvania. I would go Bifrost for Thor. But anyway, so they end up they end up in this car wreck, which turns out it was caused by a white guy and his wife. I had to make sure that I mention he's white because most of the people in this movie are native, and which is fucking awesome. And he was actually drunk driving. He hit a car, crashed it off the road, and when Thomas and Victor decide to get involved and start trying to help, the guy who caused the crash is saying it was their fault that they hit his car, and he's trying to start a physical fight with Victor, and his wife is just like, oh my god, I can't believe I fucking married this guy.
Basically.
You're drunk, you caused it, and
enough.
And at this point, there's really no access to cell phones in '98 like there is now. And even then, they were in such a remote area. And Victor decides he's going to run. He's gonna go on foot to get help. And they're like, the nearest hospital is 20 miles from now. What are you doing? And he runs. And I think that this is reminiscent of his own spirit quest. If I can be so bold as to say that, because he ends up, he's running for miles. I don't know how, they don't say how long he ran for, but he ran for a very long time in some fucking slick boots. That's how you could follow the path back to the crash, just follow the drip, because he was dripping in swag, and running in these boots, and until he can't anymore, until he collapses. He almost fucking kills himself running. And the man who picks him up in his head is his father. And It's not a memory he's ever had of his own father. It's a memory he had from Thomas telling a story about his father, which is really beautiful. That's I think that's kind of the culmination of his quest. Is he learns that I don't know, fathers are there to pick you up in one way or another, whether they're here or not, and whether his father actually did in real life or not. I think his own growth comes through. I don't want to say being able to necessarily forgive his father, but just to come to terms with what happened, and knowing that, all right, listen, you can choose to let it make you or break you at this point.
Yeah.
And of course, the person who actually picks him up is some dude working on the roadside. And and they, luckily everyone's able to get to a hospital. The woman who was in the car crash is better. She's alive. She's not doing great. Is she like in a full body cast when they get to the hospital or something?
I mean, she was dying. Like, and this is before cell phones. Like, the drunk guy was even like, "That's a dead woman you're talking to." He was a real piece of shit.
He really was.
He's like, "She's dead. Don't even bother." I was like, Jesus, man.
Yeah, they made absolute sure to express how much of an asshole this guy was, to the point that the guys find out, Victor and Thomas find out, that the police report submitted involves them being blamed. And even though the woman whose mother was in the car crash said, no, these two, helped us, she says that they're probably not going to take her word over it, compared to this guy. And I think they kind of make it look like this guy, between what he and his wife are wearing, the car they're driving,
right.
They're both wealthy white people. Like, they're both well off. They're well-to-do.
They have a lot of pull. So she's like, get out of here.
Like,
right,
she's like, you better go. And he's like, all right, cool, let's go. But they do end up going to the police station. I think it's to get Arnold Joseph's ashes, right?
Well, they go back to the room to get their stuff, and the two cops are waiting for them.
Okay, so that's how they end up
and
there. Check my phone for a sec.
And they bring him over to I guess the sheriff or the police chief or whoever he is. And it's a very interesting interaction. Like, he calls them Injuns. Like, he asks what type of Injuns they are. So, like, he just, like, is very openly racist.
Yeah, because, like, it's such a tough thing, too, because Injun isn't as bad as, like, Redskin, right? Yeah. But Injun is still, I think it's a very commonly used, and it's kind of okay for them to use it. You know what I mean? Like, I personally don't think it's okay, but it's more of like the soft racism. It's close to calling them Indians, which even then
it's still racist.
Fucking accurate.
Yeah.
Yes. It's so bad it's to the point that they call themselves that. And let's go back to the argument of, well, if they say it, can I say it?
No.
Fucking take a little bit of extra time and just say Native or say Indigenous.
Yeah.
I don't even say Native American because this continent wasn't called that before it was named. So, but yeah, despite his inherent bigotry or bias, he does end up kind of giving them a break. And thanks to the white lady tears of Mrs. Cicero, the wife of the man who was drunk driving, because they're ready to take his word. It doesn't seem like they want to take the word of the other woman involved in the crash. But, Mrs. Cicero, the wife of the drunk driver, says, my husband's an asshole. And they kind of accept that. And I think also he sees when he's looking at the coffee can and, Victor goes, that's my father. That's his ashes. He kind of takes his hand off and he's like, oh shit, like this is, maybe not the best time to be pressing these guys. They've been through a lot.
Right. Yep. Exactly.
And it was nice for him to kind of just see them as two fellow men, two fellow humans, instead of, I'm the white man, they're the quote unquote Injuns or whatever. And I think that was great for Mrs. Cicero to kind of, not side with her husband, because we have talked in previous episodes about the dangers of white lady tears. But she uses her privilege to be an ally and help these guys. And at the end of it, when they finally get back home, actually, I want to talk real quick about the basketball, because Victor leaves the basketball behind, which is wild. He loves basketball. It's his favorite thing. I think maybe it's because it reminds him of playing with his father, that was like his connection to him.
He held on to it.
Yeah, but he does find out that his father used to say that Victor was the best at basketball. He probably wouldn't be better at anything else.
Yeah.
And that combined with Thomas telling this dude that he kind of needs to get his life together and shit, reminds me kind of Good Will Hunting, which actually would have been a much more appropriate name for a Native movie than a movie about a couple guys from Boston. But, Victor starts thinking to himself about the kind of man he wants to be, the kind of person he wants to be. Is he going to just play baseball and lounge around all the time? Or, and he doesn't even have alcohol as an excuse like his father did. He just doesn't really seem to be motivated to do anything. Hashtag mood. Hashtag same. But yeah, he leaves the basketball behind, and he also apologizes to Thomas. And he says, like, oh, I'm sorry for getting us in that wreck. And he says, the wreck wasn't your fault. And he's like, I'm sorry for all of the wrecks. And, he finally, I think, is able to see that while his father may not have ever apologized for his own misdoings, and while he ran away from his problems and decided to become a better person elsewhere, Victor decides he's going to become a better person at home where he can really make a difference. At least that's my interpretation of it.
I also like that when they get back, Thomas asks him, did you ever find out like why your father left? And Victor says, he didn't mean to, Thomas. He didn't mean to. And I, excuse me. He means that in multiple ways. He didn't mean to kill Thomas's parents. He didn't mean to be a bad father. He didn't mean to leave, but he did. And I think they're finally coming to terms with that, and I think they're ready to kind of move on and heal from all of this.
And speaking of healing, obviously there's the moment where Victor gives half of Arnold's ashes to Thomas, which was great because, he kind of was a father, once again, not the best father figure to anybody on the reservation, I'm sure, but he was a father to Thomas in his own way. And from what we hear, a bit of a better father to Thomas than he was to Victor. Or maybe it's just, like you said, Thomas is the one who always sees the good in people. So while sure lots of bad things have happened, he only remembers the good ones. And, we should all be so lucky, right?
Yep.
To just remember the great things about people. And now that I'm thinking about it, like, a lot of things always go, anything that have to do with fathers is always going to go back to my own shit, and it's going to go back to the Lord of the Rings episode where we talked extensively about it. But, that was kind of my mom's whole thing too, is, for all of the bad that he brought into her life, getting her addicted to a bunch of drugs and mooching off of her disability and welfare money and money because she was, she is a paranoid schizophrenic. She was disabled. She couldn't work. She only remembered the good things about him.
Yeah.
She had nothing but excitement in her eyes when he walked into the room. And, it was very much the opposite for me. I was the victor. And, so I've related a lot more with this character than I thought I would. And I am glad that Victor kind of did become the focal point of the story, because it starts off through Thomas's eyes and through Thomas's voiceover.
Yes.
Yeah. And whereas, that would have been nice. I've seen the Community episodes that are all about Abed. I'm good for this. I can just see a story about Victor, who is very much a toxic male, just like his father was, and him learning to accept responsibility for his own actions. And at the very end, when he goes to Spokane, just where Thomas used to go, and he lets the ashes out in that running river, and he just fucking yells, man. He's yelling triumphantly.
Yeah.
And it was so emotional. It was so effective. I love that moment.
It was. I mean, this was Victor's journey. I don't think Thomas had the same resentments or angers that Victor did. So, he was a part of Victor's journey in helping him. Do you think
know what? He was his guide?
He was, and
right?
he has that final narration. He's the storyteller, talking about forgiving fathers and what's left when you do, and it's very powerful. And I have a question for you. Do you think Thomas knew that Arnold was the one that killed his parents?
I can't answer that for sure.
Because the grandmother actually says to him when he gets back, "Tell me what's going to happen." And he closes his eyes. Like, did he actually know a lot of things? Is he supposed to be like the spiritual guide that sees what's happened and sees what's going to happen? Is that like part of? I don't know. It was thrown in at the very end, but.
Well, that's this beautiful moment, and it's, it kind of makes you think maybe Thomas is the most authentic Indian, because he had stuck to that tradition. And his grandma says, tell me what happened, and then says what's going to happen. And he kind of just has this introspective moment. And that's when his narration starts, the voiceover at the end, the whole monologue, which, look it up yourself. You know what? I'll find it and I'll put it in, I'll find a YouTube link and But I can't say for sure that he did know. I wouldn't doubt it. Like if let's say this movie is kind of going that supernatural route. I know it's technically not supernatural, but that's, for lack of a better term, that's all I can, let's say the spiritual route, right? Then yeah, I could see Thomas knowing full well everything, because he is so connected to everybody and he's so connected to love, and that's why he is privy to things that nobody else is privy to, because really that journey gets underway because of Thomas. Thomas actually wants to help Victor with money, and and he's the Samwise Gamgee of the crew.
Yeah.
And but also I'm very sure it could have gotten thrown around there. It's a small reservation. I mean, it's a big reservation, but everybody knows everybody. I'm sure people talk, and I'm sure it's come about. I wouldn't doubt that it's come about, and Thomas knew that, and he chose to see the good in the Joseph family as opposed to all of the bad things they were responsible for in his life. But there is another part of me that says, no, he doesn't fucking know. He's, very into his own stuff, and isn't good at reading other people. And, I'm sure that he didn't mean to means a very different thing to him than it meant to Victor.
Yeah.
Who now has to carry the sins of his father. He has to know that his father, and also, who's to say that anybody else on the reservation knows? I mean, Susie Song knows, but does the rest of the Coeur d'Alene tribe know? They might not.
I mean, Arnold was the only one supposedly awake at the house when it happened, but did he tell anyone else? Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? But yeah, sorry I can't give a more definite answer there. I would like either. I would like either ending. But I do just want to talk about the end of his monologue, where he says, if we forgive our fathers, what is left? And I know that really stuck with me, because I think, for Victor, his whole story was about forgiving his father and becoming his own man once he was able to let that go. And, I'm sure there are a lot of people that their family is kind of the drive for them becoming who they are, being who they want to be. And you know what? I'll quote something that my aunt once said to me. We were at this place in Queens called Veggie Castle 2. Serves an amazing vegan buffet, Ty. It's so fucking.
What is it called?
Veggie Castle 2.
Where's that?
In Queens.
Queens. Oh.
So we're talking, and I'm talking about where I want to move, and I'm like, listen, I don't want to die in New York. I don't want to die where I grew up. I don't want to be that person. And she told me, she said, think of where you want to be, not where you don't want to be. Because saying I don't want to is just negative in its very core, right? The sheer linguistics of it require it to be a negative statement. But, I think we have to choose, and obviously that I take trauma very seriously. I do think to a point we have to choose a path for ourselves that's less, I don't want to be this person, and talk about who you want to be.
Yeah.
And,
agreed.
That's, good. But that's something I've been coming to terms with myself. And, and I think also just on a professional level, we went to visit, my wife's godkids on Halloween and just drop off a couple bags of candy for them. And, the girl, she must be 11, 12 years old by now. And, she was talking about what she wants to be when she grows up. And I want to be this, I want to do that, I want to be a doctor, blah, blah, blah. And then I listened to an episode of Daily Zeitgeist the other day. I still do from time to time. And, they were talking about how ridiculous it is and lazy it is to just ask a kid when you first see them, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because all that is that's a profession, right? We say, what kind of employment do you want?
Yeah.
But we never ask anybody who they want to be when they grow up. If I end up being an unemployed house husband for the rest of my life, but my wife and I are happy, and my dog is also happy with us.
But society doesn't care about that.
No, society doesn't.
That's why they make an 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid decide to take out, $200,000 in student loans so they can go get the career that they have decided they want. And then, 2 years in, they realize, fuck, this isn't really what I want with my life, but now I have to spend my money to pay for this education that I've partially gotten for something that I don't want to do. You know, it's
Yep.
it's tough. It's tough. They don't, like you said, they don't ask you who you want to be. They ask you what you want to be. And, you know, how do you really know growing up, you know? I wanted to be Spider-Man, but that didn't pan out. So, you know.
I'm putting that on my to-do list for 2021. 2019, help Tyler make a movie. 2020, help Tyler make a podcast. Luckily, I already had one. 2021, Tyler is Spider-Man.
You just make my dreams come true. Oh man.
That's all I can do. I'm your Thomas to your Victor, bro. Hey Tyler. Hey Tyler.
Oh God, no. No. Would you shut up, Thomas?
And by the way, Thomas is a fucking hunk. You check out his IMDb, or even when he just like let his hair down in the movie and took off his glasses. It was like She's All That. They could have done She's All That.
He's all that, the Native American version.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, he's a fucking hunk. But they really made a point in the movie to kind of like make him that kind of like high pitched.
So kiss me.
Yeah.
Right. They could do like a whole
God.
like native version of that song.
Beneath the silver star sparkling. Okay, that's all I'll do. Before that and the Colors of the Wind thing get me fucking destroyed. Luckily, we only have 5 fucking listeners.
Yeah. And all 5 of them turn out to be Native Americans, so great job.
You know, in the last episode, I did drop the N-bomb with a hard R.
You did.
So,
I was really, I was shocked.
I was quoting a movie.
Did. You said you did warn people.
I did give a trigger warning, and I mean, I was mostly saying it for the listeners, but maybe I'm becoming like Tucker Carlson.
Fucker Carlson.
As we get more listeners, I start becoming like a terrible right wing.
I was thinking about that. We became the very thing that we hate. You know.
I mean, if you can't beat him, join him, right?
Right.
But yeah, any closing thoughts on this film, Ty?
No, I just think it's like we said earlier, it's a feel-good movie. You know, it's very 90s. I think it should be recognized as being such a integral part for Native Americans to have a role in creating the film, not just being the subject of it. And if you're looking for something to watch this month, watch Smoke Signals because it's really great.
It's an hour and a half of your time, and it goes by so quickly. I think the pacing is pretty good, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, if I remember correctly, you did say it's a weird movie, but I think the weirdness, I don't think you meant weird, but it is, like, got me thinking about it. Is it a weird movie? Like, there's something about it that is a little different.
Yes.
And I think it's just because of how genuine it is as an indie film in the 90s. Like, it's not as pretty as we're used to.
I think that's it too. You know, I not all of the actors come off as like the most experienced actors, things like that, you know, but at the same time it's a very successful film. So usually I feel like when those things happen, you get like a really like a rough film, you know, but this doesn't feel rough to me. It just has an interesting feel to it, and I liked it. It was different. It wasn't, this big blockbuster. I enjoyed it.
And on that note, I'm going to remind everybody to please go to iTunes or wherever you're getting your podcasts. Obviously, listen to us. That's how you hear our voices. But also rate and review us when you get the chance. You can find our channel on YouTube where you can like and subscribe to our page, like our videos. Subscribe to the page, hit the alert button. That way you get an update every time we release a new episode. And on the YouTube channel specifically is where you will find all of our outtakes. In addition to that exclusive content, we have a lot of exclusive content we're actually going to be putting on our Patreon. I'm not going to talk about that in this episode. I think we'll cover it in housekeeping this week. So just keep that in mind. If you listen to that episode, we'll have kind of a quick rundown of our potential tiers and benefits. You can find us on Twitter at PolitiPopPod, Instagram at PolitiPopPodcast, email us at politipopcast@gmail.com. Always find our show notes and sources at politipopcast.wordpress.com. Special thanks to you listeners, and always to Antonia Chava for logo design. For the Politipop Podcast, I've been Mike Booch.
I've been Ty.
And remember, no matter what you're watching this month, no matter what you're eating during fucking Thanksgiving, or Indigenous Peoples Remembrance Day, whatever you want to call it, no matter what you're listening to, no matter what you're reading, whatever it is, never stop thinking, never stop learning. Please fucking take care of yourselves. We didn't talk about the election at all, but we will in the housekeeping this week. And always remember to just read between the lines.
And scene.
There we go. That was good.